us pray, some of us take some action internally. But amongst us, there are few people who really go out of the way to not only get concerned, do their part, to put their lives in the hands of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to help physically, putting themselves in danger for the cause of humanity. It's my privilege certainly to welcome such a person in the personality of Dr. Zaher. I won't take too much time explaining. We have sent the brief background to you all, but suffice it to say that he has not only devoted his life in working for causes here, but globally. And he's among the few people who have really been recognized throughout the world. I'm sure he's not looking for recognition. Dr. Zaher has been working locally. He has been the chairman of CUIGC. He has been active in the Syrian Medical Association. And also, he is now the president and perhaps the founder or one of the founders of Med Global, which is known globally for working in areas which are war-torn. And I personally remember the article that I read in New York Times about his sacrifices. Without further ado, let me extend a warm welcome to my dear friend. And I don't call him friend, but a role example for me, with whom I had the privilege of working before. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much, Dr. Sir.
Jazakallah khairan for the nice presentation and introduction that I do not deserve. And Brother Wasim and I, we go all the way back. We were together in the executive committee of CIOGC for 4 years. That was between 2007 to 2011, yeah. And at that time, CIOGC was on a transition where the community started to know about CIOGC and its work, but we really were not clear about our mission. So we focused on civic engagement at that time. We focused on signature programs. We started programs like Illinois Muslim Action Day, IMAD, in the first year. We tried to focus on fundraising and making sure that we have sound financial systems. We started a program called Green Ramadan to link fasting to reducing carbon production within the Muslim community, and all kind of other programs. And I remember that when we used to have executive committee meeting, we used to meet for 4 hours, 5 hours every month. And the people in that executive committee meeting, including Brother Wasim, they shared all of their wisdom and passion for the community. I came to Chicago from Syria in 1989. I'm a physician, a critical care specialist. I did my training at UIC, University of Illinois at Chicago. I'm in private practice. Assalamu alaikum. And I got to know my wife, Suzanne Akras, and have 3 children, and now have 1 grandchild and another grandchild in the making, inshallah. And I'm blessed to be in this community. I started my volunteer work at the Mosque Foundation in the traffic committee, and directing the traffic in Ramadan and Eid. Then became a member of the board of the Mosque Foundation, multiple committees, like many of you, educational and otherwise. We then became the president of the Mosque Foundation for 5 years. We had our largest expansion of the Mosque Foundation at that time. We tripled the capacity of the mosque. So I think everything that mosque community dealt with, we had to deal with. And the Mosque Foundation community is mostly Palestinian community, but also quite diverse. Post 9/11, it was really hard on us because we were targeted. So we had to deal not only with the expansion of the community and the programs for the youth and women and the converts and building relationship with our neighbors, but the pressure that maybe we have similar pressure nowadays with the current administration. The Islamophobia, the targeting of Muslims, and many members of our community were targeted Some of the NGOs at that time that were working, and famous NGOs, the top 10 Muslim NGOs in the United States were closed, if you remember, post 9/11 and targeted. So we had to deal with all of these issues, and at the same time making sure that we provide services to the community and make sure that our masjid is welcoming and hospitable and open the door to everyone and build a relationship, interfaith and otherwise. Uh, Later on, I was elected to become the CIOGC chairman for 4 years. And then the crisis in my homeland in Syria started in 2011. And if you're not familiar with the history, at that time, there was something called the Arab Spring, where people went to the street in Egypt and in Tunisia, started in Tunisia, then spread to the rest of the Arab world, where young people wanted to have more from their governments, from their authoritarian regimes. So they wanted to have freedom, they wanted to have democratic reforms, they wanted to have a say in the future of their countries. Um, there's debate now about whether that was the best way that things happened. You know, some people call it the winter, the Arab winter, instead of the Arab Spring. But some countries had changes. Some countries did not have changes. Unfortunately, also there were civil war that were started because of this process. When you have authoritarian regime that have been going on for a long time, it's difficult to change. And the geopolitics intervene, external powers intervene, and that's why we had painful civil wars in Libya, in Yemen, and in Syria. And in Syria, the war lasted for 14 years. It led to the displacement of half of the population. Syria is a small country in the eastern of the Mediterranean area, 22 million people, but it's located in very strategic areas, surrounded by Turkey, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq. And also, it has a lot of history, as we know. For us in the Muslim community, we know that Syria was at one point, Damascus was the capital of the largest empire or Khilafate, the Umayyad Khilafate, Khilafah al-Umayyah. And at that time, Damascus was the capital of an empire that from China in the east to Indonesia to Spain in the west. So there is a lot of history, Islamic history and otherwise, Christian history, Jewish history in Syria. Syria is the cradle of civilization, as they say. The first alphabet was discovered in Syria. The first musical note was discovered in Syria. Many of the Sahabas that were disciples of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, lived in Syria and buried in Syria. I'm from a city called Homs, where the Sahabi Khalid ibn al-Walid chose to live there, and he died there. Khalid ibn al-Walid is very well-known Sahabi of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He led many campaigns, military campaigns, and he's one of the most shrewd campaigners or military leaders in the world. And his strategies and tactics and battles are taught in military academies. So Khalid ibn al-Walid is buried in my city. We used to go with my family to the mosque and pray there, and his tomb is there. And there's many other Sahabas in Homs and Damascus, Aleppo, other places. So it's full of history, full of heritage, full of people who want to do well. And unfortunately, we had this painful civil war. It led to one of the worst refugee crises in the world. 1 out of 4 refugees right now in the world is still from Syria. 7 million Syrian refugees who are spread between Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, and Germany and other European countries. Germany received 1 million Syrian refugees. And sometimes, you know, we hear about these civil wars and refugee crisis, and we do not connect it to our lives. And I believe, and I think all of us believe, that what happens in other parts of the world will affect us at one point. So injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, as Martin Luther King says. But also, with the large influx of Syrian refugees, most of them are Muslims, to Europe, that created an anti-refugee sentiment in Europe. That created the rise of populist parties in some of the countries. led to, in my view, to the Brexit, because the UK did not want to have more refugees and immigrants from Europe, especially Muslim refugees. And that led to the election of President Trump in the first time. The first executive order of President Trump, if you remember, when he was elected the first time, I'm not talking politics, I'm talking history, was the executive order to, it's called the Muslim ban, where he banned people who belong to 6 Muslim countries from coming to the United States. And we know what happened later on. So these things that happen in other places in the world affect us. So that the Syrian crisis created this anti-immigrant, anti-refugee sentiment. It's still going on, very strong. Actually, nowadays it's stronger even in Europe and the United States, and destroyed the country and created a lot of chaos in the Middle East and instability. So now we're in a time in the Middle East where we have a change in the regime. The Assad regime that led Syria with brutality, extreme brutality for 54 years is gone. And I've never imagined in my life that I will see a day where we do not have Assad dynasty. Hafiz al-Assad, the father of the last president, Bashar al-Assad, I grew seeing him a president and hearing his speeches, and he was the only leader forever. We always used to elect him. We had 3 elections in my lifetime for Hafiz al-Assad, and he's elected by 99.9% of the vote. And sometimes you go there and they tell you, put your finger here, and you have to actually vote with blood. So they pinch your finger, and then you have to put in the blood yes for the election ballot. So imagine the brutality and this, sentiment that this person will lead Syria forever. He was very brutal. Hama, which is a city in the middle of Syria, at one point was a center of revolution or revulsion against the regime, and he crushed it, killed more than 30,000 people. And that's well known now in the history of Syria. It's called Hama Massacre in 1982 when I was in high school. There were many other massacres committed by his troops also. These information are important for us to know because I think we interact with each others, but we don't know really what is happening in Pakistan, what's happening in India, what's happening in Syria, Lebanon, other places. People come here and interact in the masjid, but sometimes we don't open up and tell our stories. I think it's important for us to tell our stories. So when the Syrian crisis started, I felt that it's my responsibility as a physician in the United States, someone who got to know how to organize the community through my work with the Mosque Foundation and CIOGC and interaction with our faith partners and the emphasis on fundraising, that maybe we should give back to my homeland. And we started by sending medical missions to Turkey and Lebanon and Jordan, and then expanded our work. At that time, I was the president of the Syrian American Medical Society, SAMS. We did all kinds of programs and projects inside Syria and the neighboring countries to provide healthcare to the refugees. Humanitarian work. And sometimes we ask ourselves, what's the difference between humanitarian work and masjid work or human rights work? And I think it's also important to ask these questions because one of the brothers was asking me, what's the difference between MidGlobal and other NGOs? Everyone is trying to do the same thing. We should be asking these questions because when you donate to an organization, you want to make sure that this money is going in the right direction. Humanitarian organization, which MidGlobal falls under the same group, believes in 4 principles. 4 principles, which are the humanitarian principles. Can anyone tell me what are the humanitarian principles? Some of them are common sense, and it's part of our faith as Muslims. What are the humanitarian principles? Why do we care about people in Syria or Palestine or Pakistan or Bangladesh? Humanity. So the first principle is humanity. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, mentioned that there is a woman that went to heaven because she gave water to a dog, to an animal. And in another hadith, he said, "If you kulli kabidin ratbatin ajr," that means if you give something to someone and he lives, or you save his life or her life, then you go to heaven. And there is blessing for that. So humanity is the essence of all religions, including Islam. And there's one famous surah in the Quran that talks about the prayer and the disconnection between the prayer and the essence of Islam. Anyone remember that short surah? Al-Ma'un. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدعو اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون يمنعون الماعون. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says prayers are important, but if you pray and you do not help other people, then there is something wrong in your prayer. That means your prayer is nullified. And actually you get punishment if you do not understand the essence of the prayer. We do not do rituals for the sake of rituals. We do not just fast because we want to become hungry. We do not just pray because it's mandatory, but because there are purposes. And the purposes of fasting and zakah and prayer is to help other people. So if we do not connect between that, and this is a humanity. So that's the first principle. The second principle is neutrality. Neutrality means that when you go to Gaza or you go to Sudan, you have to deal with different parties in order to get your medicine and food to the right people. So that's neutrality. That means you may be dealing with people that you do not like, or armies that you do not like, or governments that you do not like, because your goal is not to fight them. Your goal is to get the medicine and the food to the people that deserve them. And the third principle is impartiality. That means you're not a political organization. You do not, for example, in the context of Gaza, we're not a human rights organization, so we don't talk about occupation or genocide, because that means we will be prevented from getting the food and aid and medicine to the people in Gaza who are dying because of malnutrition and war. So our goal is to get them the medicine and the treatment, and that's impartiality. And the last principle is independence. That means we are independent from political parties or governments. Every NGO has their own mission and board of directors and vision for how they get things done. So I think it's important to just give background for why we're doing what we're doing. In 2017, we expanded the work of the lessons that we've learned from the Syrian crisis to the rest of the world. We started by sending medical missions to Bangladesh. At that time, there were the Rohingya crisis, the refugee crisis. There's 1 million Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh still now, and we still have clinics there. We started to send medical missions to Yemen. And over the past 7 years, we worked in 26 countries. We impacted 30 million people through the work of doctors and nurses in Med-Global. Most of our work nowadays is done by local physicians, local nurses. In Palestine, in Gaza, we have 300 local doctors and nurses who run 10 clinics, and they provide healthcare to 4,000 patients every day. We support them by training. We support them by providing them with salaries, medical supplies, and advocacy. And also we send medical missions, but the medical missions are less than 5% of what we do. Most of the work is done by the local communities because they are more able to understand the needs of their communities. They're more sensitive to their communities, and they understand the priorities, and they will live there forever. The most important thing in any work that we do is sustainability. Sadaqa jariyah. When you give for sustainable impact, this is better than if you give just food for 1 day or 2 days. So sustainability is one of the also concepts or principles that we embrace to the heart. Maybe you can put the first video if you're able to. Any questions so far? Any comments?
I have a question. So the new regime that took over for Syria, how do you envision them? Are they positive, or are they moving the country in the right direction, or which way do you think things are going to go in the future?
So this is a very good question, and I mean I think the most important thing that the regime, that Assad regime, and I know that some people have positive perception of the Assad regime despite its brutality. Assad, the son, killed more than 500,000 people. There were 124,000 people who disappeared in the prison. That means they were tortured to death. He used chemical weapons more than 300 times against its people. So even though that he used the resistance rhetoric against Israel, but actually he was one of the worst brutal regime against the people of Syria. And when he left, when he fled to Russia in December 8th, people celebrated in the street. Um, Muslims, Christians, Alawite, everyone was happy. I was in Syria 6 weeks ago, and you can feel the happiness in the street, in the air. People are elated, jubilant. I mean, they never imagined that there is a life without the Assad regime. The current president, Ahmed al-Shara, he has very colorful background. So I think it's important to talk about that a little bit. He's from a family from Damascus. His father used to be a deputy foreign minister, so from well-to-do family, educated and so forth. He was studying medical school, second year, when the war in Iraq started, when the American war in Iraq started. Like many other young individuals in the Arab world, he felt that he needs to go and fight the Americans. So he went there and he volunteered. And at one point, he became member of Al Qaeda. And I'm talking this about history. You know, this is history. And then he formed a group called Jabhat al Nusra, Hayat Tahrir al Sham, HTS, which moved to Syria and started to fight the Assad regime with the beginning of the Arab Spring in 2011, 2012. At that time, of course, ISIS, the Daesh, was also in Syria, and they tried to ally with them, but he chose not to. And he chose to continue to fight the Assad regime with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. And then he controlled an area in the northwest of Syria called Idlib, which is a province that has 4.2 million people. Half of them are displaced from other parts of the countries. And he continued to focus on the development in that region. It's an area that is close to Turkey, borders Turkey. As I've mentioned, half of the population are displaced from other parts of Syria. Al Qaeda is an Islamist party, of course, but with time, I used to go there in medical missions, so I saw the evolution of the governance of Idlib from very strict governance to more pragmatic, moderate governance, with emphasis on the economy, on the development, and the education. At one point, when right now there's 7 universities in this small province in Idlib, the hospital system is much better than the rest of Syria. The economy is doing very well compared to the rest of Syria. In terms of the governance, I felt that he has evolved. When he became the president, I mean, there was, of course, military campaign that started from Idlib, and then he controlled the rest of Syria within a matter of 1 or 2 weeks. And then Assad fled and the army dissolved. So it was a bloodless military campaign. Only 200 people were killed, which, you know, people expected hundreds of thousands to be killed. And he became the de facto president, and right now he's the transitional president. And he had several interviews with the news outlet, and he said, I was young when the war started in Iraq. I have evolved. Right now, I'm 45 or so years old. And my attitude and towards things and governance and Syria and so forth has changed. And the messages that he's giving to the Syrian society and the external stakeholders are very pragmatic and positive messages. It's not rigid, it's not extreme, and people actually like him. So he's very popular right now in Syria. Now, whether this will continue, whether this will is actually real, what he's saying is reflecting his conviction, it has to be seen. But in general, right now, people are happy. He's popular, and it looks like he's trying to involve other sectors of the Syrian society in the governance. So this is all positive.
My name is Tanya Baban.
I'm Amir Nofal. Hello, my name is Muhammad Umar. Hello, my name is Mustafa Banker.
Hola, mi nombre es Carla González. I'm Lydia Kuri. Assalamualaikum. This is Dr. Farhana.
السلام عليكم. معكم الدكتورة امتياز حسين عبد الله الوهاشي.
أنا عبد الرحمن الأطرش.
We're always there. But Global doesn't wait for disasters to strike. Since 2017, we've been on the ground, responding to crises within hours.
We are offering a life-saving healthcare, essential medical aid, and fighting against food insecurity.
bringing hope and essential care to those who need them most.
For me,
This is not only job, it's personal. I have joined the global organization in Gaza. That's because of several causes, many of them, that it's a humanitarian organization and due to very usual in saving our children here.
العمل المنظمة في جلوبال اللي بتمثل هي فرصة فريدة لأنه نجمع بين التميز المهني والمساهمة المجتمعية. جلوبال مو مجرد منظمة عمل بل هي بيئة بتحفزنا على تقديم أفضل ما لديك في عالم التجارب داخلها.
I'm working with Mediglobal due to its unwavering commitment to improve the healthcare access for the underserved population. Knowing that our efforts make a tangible difference in people's lives in nutrition and health, it's incredibly fulfilling, making every challenge meaningful.
I've seen firsthand the impact we have on families who lost everything, changing their lives in ways that matter.
but Med Global is also about planning for the future. We're not just responders, we are builders.
We start projects that continue long after the immediate crisis has passed. Our work is designed to provide sustainable solutions, ensuring that communities are supported both during and after disasters.
We also empower local medical staff, training them to become trainers themselves. One trained professional becomes 10, and 10 become 100.
Through partnerships with local governments and local partners, we create programs that save lives and will continue to do so for generations to come.
None of this would be possible without your support.
Every donation
Every contribution
allows us to provide critical care.
To those in the greatest need, together, we're making a real lasting difference in the world.
So if you've noticed in this video, and these are our current programs, so we're not only a Muslim majority countries, but also we have programs in Ukraine, we have programs in Colombia and Mexico. And I hope that we all believe that a human being that is suffering in Mexico has the same, we have the same responsibility to save her or him, similar to a Palestinian or Syrian or someone from Pakistan. I think this goes without saying. And we believe in moral consistency. That means we don't only provide care to the people who are like us, but also who are people who are different from us. And that way, that will give you actually more power. When you help people in different parts of the world, other people will help you. So it's also very Machiavellian, if you want to call it, but also it's the essence of humanity. So we have to be morally consistent. Sometimes we tend to focus on people who are only Muslims or people who are only from Palestine or from Syria, because we are. But I think we have to care about everyone else. And this is the mission of Mediglobal. Maybe you can go over this. We have health inequity in Chicago. So I think the mission of Mediglobal is to reduce health inequity in the world, focusing on disaster areas. And we have emergency response, sustainable healthcare programs, and strengthening of the healthcare system. But this is my hospital in Chicago. This is St. Anthony's Hospital during the COVID pandemic. This is a small community hospital. I work in two hospitals, St. Anthony and Christ Advocate. Christ Advocate is a tertiary center. I'm a critical care specialist, lung specialist. So I deal with patients in the ICU. And we had a lot of sick patients during the COVID pandemic. Christ has all technology and specialists. So we had, for example, a machine called ECMO, where you can oxygenate the blood of the patient outside of the ventilator. St. Anthony's, on the other hand, is a small community hospital. We don't have that technology. So patients who happen to be admitted to St. Anthony's, they may die in Chicago just because we do not have that technology. The average life expectancy in the neighborhood around St. Anthony is 10 years less than the average life expectancy in the areas around Christ Advocate Medical Center in Chicago. So we deal with these health inequities in our neighborhoods also. So it's important to connect the local to the global. Next. This is Dr. Al-Hariri. He's a surgeon in Syria. I was visiting him in 2015 in his hospital when the regime bombed the hospital. And he's here trying to salvage some of the medical supplies in the hospital to use it for other places. So when we have wars, when we have disasters, we have to deal with attacks on healthcare. Bombing hospitals happen all the time. We're all familiar with the more than 1,000 hospitals in Gaza that were attacked. More than 1,000 Palestinian medics in Gaza were killed, and there are more than 300 medics in Gaza are detained, including 6 of our medical staff team. Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, who's our lead pediatrician in Gaza, is still detained, and we received some information from his family that they were able, the lawyer was able to visit him, and he was tortured. So these things happen in war zones, that hospitals attacked and physicians and nurses are killed sometimes and injured and detained. We have mass casualties. So you have large number of people who are coming with after a bomb or missile hits. And I've seen some of that in many areas where I went in my medical missions. Shortage of food and clean water, electricity and communication. We have limited resources. We have really to preserve what we have. And sometimes you have to be very creative. You don't have abundance of everything. Sometimes people just die because there's no surgeon who can operate or because there's no blood transfusion in war zones. So you have very limited resources. You have to difficult to reach areas and besieged regions. It's not easy to get into Gaza. It's not easy to get into some areas in Sudan and Darfur. It's not easy to get some areas in Syria during the peak of the war. And you have lack of access, of course, to healthcare. So people may die just because of diarrhea and there's no IV fluid, or just because of simple infection that can be treated with antibiotics. So these things happen in a war zone. You have people who have chronic diseases who don't have access to their medications, diabetes, heart medicine, COPD, and asthma. So sometimes we just connect the war to casualties related to the bombs. But actually, you have more patients who die just because they were not able to be admitted to hospital for C-section or for treatment of cancer or treatment of infection or pulmonary embolism or heart attack. Outbreaks happen because of the pollution of the water. So we've seen outbreaks of cholera, outbreaks of hepatitis in Gaza, and polio even surfacing. Mental health trauma, everyone is traumatized because of the violence and displacement, and then disruption of training and education of medical students. Next. And this is one of our teams that went to Yemen, and you can look at our team and see the diversity. It is important that we work with diverse teams. Sometimes it's comfortable to work with people who are like you, but diversity is also a value that we should always embrace. And some of the best moments during our medical missions is when we break bread and eat with the local communities, with the doctors and the nurses in area. And this is one of the meals that we're invited to in Yemen. Next. And this is one of our earliest medical missions. I think some of you, your son went to with MediGlobal to Bangladesh. This is one of the largest refugee camps in the world. It has about 750,000 refugees, Rohingya refugees, in Cox's Bazar area in Bangladesh. And we went there in 2017. We were sending a medical team every week. And right now we have a couple of clinics, and we provide also training to doctors and midwives in the community. So we do not only support the healthcare of the Rohingya refugees, but also the host community, so they can also embrace the refugees. Next. And this is one of our missions to Ukraine, where we took a lot of medical supplies and with us, and also we continue to train physicians in Ukraine on mass casualties and other needed skills. Next. We also trained Ukrainian physicians and medics on how to deal with chemical weapons and biological weapons. Next. We do a signature program called POCUS training, and this is an iPad, and this is a probe, digital probe. So you can connect the probe to the iPad or to your iPhone, and the iPhone or the iPad becomes a Doppler screen. And you can say, okay, well, what's the purpose of this? This is an adaptive technology that is relatively inexpensive. So you can use it in Gaza, in the war zone. You can use it in Syria, in Bangladesh, where you have limited resources. And you can put the probe on the belly to see if there is any bleeding. You can put the probe on the chest to see if there is any air or blood. You can put it on the heart to see what's the heart function. So as a physician, you can make a decision at the bedside that can be the difference between life and death. So in 2019, we started training Palestinian physicians in Gaza on the use of portable ultrasound. There's a company called Butterfly that created a small adaptable portable ultrasound. So we took it with us and we trained people in Al Shifa Hospital on the use of portable ultrasound, and also Nasser Hospital. Then we donated a bunch of these portable ultrasound. Every 3 months, we used to send a medical team to provide this training. And when the war started, this war started, I was there in January for 2 weeks in Gaza, and I noticed that every emergency room physician, every critical care specialist is using portable ultrasound. So imagine how many thousands of lives were saved with this technology. So sometimes you do things for long term and you don't know the impact until a few years after that. So thousands of patients, tens of thousands of patients were saved because of this use of technology. So that's the essence of sustainability. Next. Also, we have multi-specialty clinic. This is me treating this patient who has hepatitis A. And this is Dr. Zaher Ahmed, who's putting an breathing tube on this young child who was injured in one of the missiles attack by Israel. And he had brain injury and abdominal injury. And he is resuscitating him at the floor of the emergency room. And this is typical. When you have a mass casualty event, there is no enough beds, there is no enough resources, so we used to treat these patients on the floor of the emergency room. One of those mass casualty events, there were 35 people who were injured and brought to the hospital at the same time. And so we have to struggle to how to resuscitate and which one you give priority, because some of them you may not be able to take care of in the war situation. You can save them in the peace situation, but in the war situation, you cannot save them because it will take a lot of resources. 7 of those people died on arrival, and the rest, some of them had surgery, some of them survived, and some of them unfortunately did not survive. This child, I asked him, I saw him in the emergency room, he was displaced with his family. What would you like to be in the future? And he said, I want to be a doctor. So sometimes, just planting the seed of hope in the children in a war zone is important. When he sees doctors coming from the United States to support his community, so his future will be brighter, and you plant the seed that we are there to support you. Next. And this is our team in Colombia. We have clinics to support migrants in 2 cities in Colombia, Venezuelan migrants in Cucuta and Medellin. Next. This is some of our training in Ukraine and Bangladesh. This is Bangladesh, this is Yemen, this is Ukraine, using the same technology. And this is one of the death certificates of the children, one of the children in Gaza. I took the picture, this picture, and I shared it with the media here when I came back. One of the most important things that we can do when we come back is to advocate on behalf of the population that we serve. So using our voices to write articles, to meet with the media, to meet with policymakers, and telling them the story is as important as providing care by itself. So advocacy is one of the most important things that doctors and nurses, when they go to war zone or to disaster area, can make after they come back, because people listen to personal stories. If I can tell you about the story of this child and what happened to him, it's more influential. You will be affected more than I tell you that 14,000 children in Gaza were killed, or 45,000 people in Gaza were killed. So names, pictures, videos are very important. Next. So that's this is me with Ambassador Samantha Power in the United Nations Security Council, advocating on behalf of the Syrian at the peak of the refugee crisis and the chemical weapons attacks. Next. And this is Dr. Nahreen Ahmed, one of our medical directors, who is training the Yemeni physicians on the use of the portable ultrasound. Next. This is Dr. John Kaler. He's a pediatrician from Chicago. He went with us to Yemen and Syria and other places in Gaza. And he received this gift from the Yemeni governor of Ma'rib. So building relationship is very important. Breaking bread, creating friendship that will last forever. And some of these friendship will, inshallah, create more organizations that can help other people. And maybe we can end with the other video.
Joining me right now is Dr. Zaher Sehloul. He's the president of Med Global, a humanitarian organization focused on emergency response and health programs. They have a team of doctors in Gaza right now.
Citizens bring in mass casualties. There often are rushes of 20, 30, 40 people brought into the emergency room at one time being dealt with on the floor. There's absolutely no room in the hospital whatsoever. There's patients on the floor, on the stairs, everywhere. It's a catastrophe. It isn't collapsing, it is virtually collapsed.
This hospital is not functioning, but there's pandemonium. It's total chaos. These patients, many of whom are either amputees or they have been injured or they're even just sick from some sort of bacterial infection. They're not able to move around, and there is no staff to check on them or to give them the antibiotics that they need or to deliver the care. And so there is a true level of uncertainty taking place here. They are all at risk.
I've been in Gaza 4 times before, and Gaza has a reasonable healthcare system despite of the blockade over the years. And their doctors and nurses are very capable, and they're up to date on medical knowledge. They need support, and now they have this huge influx of injured patients. Besides that, they had the bombing. More than 76 health centers were attacked. Several physicians and nurses were killed in the attacks, and ambulance.
The situation has only gotten worse since you were there. The Gaza Health Ministry now has placed the child death toll at least 12,300, with thousands more still missing.
We've come out of Aleppo. We worked in Haiti after the earthquake. We worked in Yemen. We worked in Sudan. And this is by far the worst situation I've ever seen. This is a soul-crushing event. And I've been through many of these, but this is by far the worst I've ever seen. When we were there, there were mass casualty events happening each night with bombings, and there were several children that were brought in dead on arrival.
People are asking, what can we do to help the Palestinian people in Gaza during the war and after the war? And there's a lot of things that you can do. You can support organizations like Med Global by donating to our medical programs. You can volunteer in our medical missions. We are planning to send medical teams based on the priorities and the specialties that are requested here every 2 weeks. Jazakumullah khairan for your attention, and I'll be happy to take any questions or feedback or advice. The purpose of this presentation is just to entice you to the world of humanitarian work and medical work in particular, stimulate maybe our thinking about what should we ask when someone like me, or maybe Ramadan is coming, and I think you'll have every night someone who's doing fundraising, maybe. Yes. So what kind of questions you should ask? What's going on really in Gaza and Syria? I'll be happy to talk about Gaza and Syria for 2 hours. There's a lot of details, but it's important to see what you're thinking and what kind of questions that are going in your mind based on this presentation.
So what's the administrative cost of Med Global?
We focus on the program. So the question was what the administrative cost of Med Global. And this is one of the most important questions that you should ask in organizations. And the reason that you're asking these questions, because some of the NGOs, some of them are very well known. American Heart Association, the administrative expenses is 50%. That means for every dollar that you donate, 50% goes to administration. So in Med Global, 92% of your donation goes into programs. Programs mean medicine, surgeries, salaries of doctors and nurses in the field. So that means 8% goes to administration and fundraising, because fundraising by itself has expenses. And this is very good. Less than 15% in general is accepted for administrative and fundraising expenses. There's 3 types of expenses for NGOs. NGOs, like any other corporations, have different classes of expenses. So you have programs, food or medicine or mental health support. In our case here, medical programs. And then you have administrations related to the utilities, rents, and things like that, salaries of directors of programs and so forth, printing, and then you have fundraising expenses. So anything less than 15% of administrative expenses is acceptable. We believe in collaboration. We have tons of collaborations with all organizations that you're aware of, probably Muslim Aid, UMR, Islamic Relief, many other organizations. Imana, at one point we wanted to collaborate in Yemen, but it did not go through. But inshallah, in the future, Helping Hands, we have programs, HCI, there's all kind of partnerships that we have, especially in Gaza and Yemen and Sudan.
If I could make a couple of very good points, if I may. I think the work that is being done by Med Global, which I've been watching for several years, I've been listening and seeing people who have actually been there, like Dr. Zaher, who I think local person. IFM has a tradition of sharing its resources with organizations and people who are actually doing work, noble work. We collect a lot of money from people for that purpose. This is probably one of the most generous organizations in this world. I think we have the car funds, we have individual contributions that we make. I would strongly recommend to both management, I'm not a part of it, but to management to come forward when they donate money at the end of the year, to think about people who are actually not just sitting, everybody is contributing in some way, but these people are actually physically doing something. I'm a grandfather. My 3 grandchildren were with me yesterday. Those kids who have broken hands and broken heads, you can imagine the pain that they undergo. I had a fracture on a middle finger, and I was looking at the clock as to when I can have some relief. And we are sitting here, alhamdulillah, not realizing what is it like to have no medical care. Many of you are physicians, some of you have experiences. So normally I never request that we support an organization, one organization, or the other. But when it comes to relief of pain and healing, I think this is #1 priority. Because in reading the Quran, I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always said to help somebody is probably the biggest sawab that you have. And I know personally the devotion that Dr. Sehloul has for many years, and the leadership thus far. So I strongly urge everyone to really come forward while they cannot do what he is doing. We can do our part in helping him do what he's doing. So I again want you all who are members, including our management, to think when we give money out from people's money, then we should consider supporting the organization. Then it is the business of healing, preventing pain. I just can't imagine children, particularly, and even others, suffering from pain without hope, without looking at the fact that I'm going to call my physician tomorrow, or I'm going to go to the hospital. And this is something that breaks our hearts. So I strongly urge management to really look at other ways and individuals and help people like Dr. Zaher do his job in the way that
Thank you, Brother Wasim. And I think we have few other questions. And the more that you ask these questions, I think it's important. Now, whether you donate to MediGlobal or other organizations, I think it's good. But ask the questions. Ask about the administrative cost. Ask about what else you can do besides giving medicine. If you have sustainable healthcare programs, if you are supporting local doctors and nurses, um, do you only depend on donations from us, or do you have other ways to bring money? So for every dollar that you donate, we get $3 from grants and from gift in kind. So we augment your donation. So that means we are not only dependent on donations from zakat, and this is also powerful. So sustainability, administrative cost, localization, supporting local physicians, sustainability, and also having other grants. Sister, and then brother. Yeah, I think we have disaster in this country that the current administration chose to cut aid to many of it is of countries and programs that provided life-saving medicine or food. Some of them, for example, cutting the aid for HIV treatment in Africa, which millions of people were dependent on, or even food for people who are displaced in Sudan, and many other instances. So this is something that I think we have to fight, because this is not fair. We are the most resourceful country in the world, and our country, which is our tax money, was used to pay for this moral. I believe these are moral programs, and it's good also for our countries to have good PR, and now they're cut off. Alhamdulillah, we're not affected by that as MediGlobal, because we don't get any grants from the US government. So we depend on grants from foundations, from corporations, from faith organizations like this, and individual donors, and also from UN. We get the grants from WHO, from UNICEF, and so forth. So indirectly, though, because the US will cut aid at one point to the UN, we may be affected. But, yeah, WHO, I mean, that's a catastrophe. Yeah. Salam.
Based on the limited resources, the recommendation to focus on one or two organizations and focus really on that, or to spread as much as you can in different areas across. That's the first question. And the second question is specifically for medical. Is your challenge funding, or is it something else that is a bigger challenge for you in terms of growth you need to provide? Is it really money, or is there more logistical or other stuff that even if you have money waiting for you in the bank, you're unable to use it because of other things?
Both questions are good. Excellent. So the first one, and I try to answer them. I don't have the whole answer. So for example, if you want to donate to medical work in Gaza, and you have 10 organizations asking for the same thing, ask these questions. Do you have local sustainable healthcare programs? Are you supporting local doctors and nurses? Are you supporting strengthening the healthcare system in Gaza, rebuilding, providing technology? Are you giving anything besides the money that I'm going to give you? That means you're giving grants from the UN, you're sending medical team to provide training. So, and then you decide which organization that maybe meet these questions. But don't just give based on the impulse or on the power of the word that someone comes in Ramadan, and some people are more articulate than others. So you may know there might be some organization that they're not coming to the masjid for whatever reasons, but they do much better work than other organizations, famous organizations. So that's the first one. You have limited resources, as you know, and you have to choose which crisis that you want to focus on this year. I don't believe, well, maybe there might be an advantage to divide the $1,000 to 100 cause, but if you give the $1,000 to one person, and that will help that one person to overcome a crisis, it's more important than give it to 1,000 people whose impact will be very minimal. So that's one thing. The second question about, what was the second question? Challenges. Alhamdulillah, when things are done well, people donate. And you find, I've never had experiences where we had program that we want to start and there's no funding. There's always way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open, whether it's grant or relationship. You may not be able to donate $10,000, but you may have someone who can donate that, or you may can create relationship that can create that. Our challenge is the capacity. So if you tell me that I would like you to start a program in Libya or Algeria or even Kashmir or Pakistan, and I don't have the capacity, that means the registration, the sustainable healthcare programs, and so it's very easy to go to any place in the world. By the way, now you have this trend within organization that they will have medical mission to Uganda or to Uzbekistan or something, and they collect few physicians and so forth, and they go and they do some surgery. This is not good, by the way, because it distracts the local community from the real work. You're not empowering local physicians. You don't have sustainable programs, and you don't know what happened to the patients that you did surgeries on them after you left. Some of them die, some of them have complications. This is not good, but it's trendy because people now like medicine and stuff like that. You see on Facebook, people going and taking pictures. So some of that is not good. So sustainable healthcare program, that means you go and register as a local organization. You do programs that are based on the priorities of the local community. You stay there for the long term. Every country that I've mentioned, we're there since the beginning, and we're staying there for long term. So but our capacity is not unlimited. Because it takes a lot of effort to start a program. It takes a lot of effort to have sustainable registration by itself. It may take 1 or 2 years to get to know the community and their needs and so forth. So that's our challenge. We have thousands of physicians and nurses who want to go with us, but we cannot send them all for medical missions. So we like to move slowly. We have to focus vertically on the communities that we are, and but inshallah in the future we'll grow even faster. We've been growing exponentially. We're one of the fastest growing NGOs in the US, by the way. We started in 2017 with nothing, and now we have a budget of about $33 million. Alhamdulillah. And we impacted 30 million people in the last 7 years in 26 countries. So we're very fast growing, and with that also comes pain, structure, strategy, dealing with different people. We're virtual organization, and then you have now this new administration that's going to create even more challenges. So there is a lot of headaches with that. We started this, it's very important, 2 years ago. It's a still small fund, but it's growing, alhamdulillah. And we decided that 5% of the donations, that unrestricted donation, will go into the endowment fund. One more maybe from the sisters? No? Feedback? Strengthen our current programs, and in the context of 3 countries that are now in the phase that we think of the rebuilding, Syria, Gaza, and Sudan, is to help in the rebuilding of the healthcare system. That means not only doing band-aids and patch stuff and emergency response, but things that will help the Ministry of Health and the local community to strengthen the healthcare system for its population. Rebuilding. Yes, brother. Then after that, yeah. Yeah, تفضل.
I have a hearing disability, so I didn't hear all of the details of the presentation, but I understand that the event is to get support to help people, especially in Gaza, and I'm very sympathetic to this, because what is happening in Gaza is the same thing that happened to our ancestors here. It's ethnic cleansing, whatever you want to call it. But there were no physicians on the Trail of Tears to help the Indians when they were removed from their land. So the only thing that I can do, I don't have money, but I make my prayers for the people of Gaza. And I would like to say something to motivate people to help anybody who's helping people in Gaza. And that's my purpose, basically, for being here. And that is to encourage people to help anybody who's helping those people who are being removed from their land, like my people were removed from our land.
جزاك الله خيرا. And الكلمة الطيبة صدقة. So a good word is a charity. A good word is a charity. So by praying for the people of Gaza, that's more than enough. Don't underestimate the power of prayer. Yeah. Salam.
I couldn't quite understand this question. Maybe I asked that, but related to that perhaps. Do you have any local chapters? Is it all outside the United States?
No, I mean, the MedGlobal is registered in Chicago. It's a local organization or local clinic. Oh, local clinic. Yeah. We had some local programs. One of them was in San Anthony's Hospital during the COVID pandemic. One of them is to establish a free clinic in Masjid Al Farouk. Also, that was at the end of the pandemic. So right now it's still going. We started it with MedGlobal, and then ICNA continued the clinic. We collaborate very closely with the MCCA, Chicago Muslim Medical Association, and they have multiple healthcare programs. But we don't have something called MedGlobal Clinic yet. Inshallah, in the future, our hands are full with what's happening in Gaza and other places. But I believe in local service. You cannot serve other people if you don't serve your local community. Yes, it's a 501c3 MedGlobal, so your donation are tax deductible. And if you donate for zakat, it will go for zakat expenses. Jazakumullah khairan.
Jazakallah khairan. It's really a pleasure having you here. It's really informative session. I'll just conclude and give it to Brother Wasim Iftikhar for last word before we start the prayer and azan.
I just want to thank you, Dr. Zaher, and appreciate your coming here. May Allah bless you and your staff. Jazakallah khair.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. أيوة. The other is there.
اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي الزكي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله